The announcement of the Bennett Foundation's annual gala swept through London's elite circles like a fire through dry grass. It was the most anticipated event of the social calendar, where politicians, celebrities, CEOs, and royalty gathered under one roof, not just to raise funds for charitable causes, but to affirm their place among the city's most powerful and influential. The invitation itself was considered a status symbol, heavy cardstock embossed in gold, delivered by hand. Only the most carefully selected names received it, and this year, the event promised to be grander than ever, held in the iconic Rose Hall, overlooking the Thames, with Michelin star chefs, an exclusive art auction, and a long list of prominent guests. The theme was legacy and power, fitting for the man behind the curtain, Richard Bennett. Richard Bennett, CEO of Bennett Global and chair of the foundation, had earned his reputation for being ruthless in the boardroom and meticulous in the details. He didn't just host events, he orchestrated them. For weeks, he had been personally curating the guest list, ensuring every name added value to his brand. He saw the gala not just as a charitable event, but as a business move, a power display. And this year, with new investors watching, image was everything. As the final confirmations were sent out, one glaring omission caught the attention of those who still remembered last year's event. Evelyn Bennett, Richard's estranged wife and former co-chair of the foundation, was missing. Her absence wasn't subtle, it was a surgical removal. No press mentions, no social posts, no acknowledgement. It didn't take long for speculation to spark. Some whispered that Evelyn had moved abroad. Others claimed she had remarried or faded into quiet retirement. The more cynical voices suggested she had simply been erased, discarded like an old piece of furniture no longer fitting the aesthetic. And yet, those who truly knew Evelyn found it odd. She had always been quiet, yes, but never passive. Her grace was deliberate, her silence powerful. This wasn't the kind of woman to disappear without reason. Something was coming, they felt it, an unspoken tension in the air, like the moment before a thunderstorm. What no one knew was that Evelyn had not only seen the snub coming, she had planned for it. In the shadows, out of sight, she had been building something far greater than anyone could imagine. This time, she wasn't attending the gala as Richard's wife. She was coming as something else entirely. Evelyn and Richard married when they were both in their late 20s. At the time, it seemed like a perfect match. Evelyn, a refined and introspective art curator from Oxford, brought grace and emotional depth to Richard's fast-paced, high-stakes world of finance. She was captivated by his drive, his intelligence, and his vision for the future, while he admired her quiet confidence and intellect. In the beginning, there was a sense of partnership between them. Evelyn helped Richard soften his image in social settings, introduced him to influential figures in the art world, and brought warmth to his otherwise cold and calculated public persona. They built their life around high-end events, luxury travel, and the pursuit of legacy. But even in those early years, small signs of imbalance began to show. Richard started making decisions without consulting her, business moves, social events, even matters involving the foundation that bore their name. He justified it as efficiency. Evelyn, ever composed, didn't argue. She simply stepped aside. As the years passed, their marriage evolved into something that resembled more of a public contract than a personal bond. Evelyn became the elegant woman beside him, always smiling, always polished, always silent. Her thoughts were no longer asked for, her opinions were treated as decorative. At galas and fundraisers, she played her role flawlessly, charming, gracious, and impeccably dressed. But inside, she was growing smaller and smaller. Her identity became tied to Richard's success. Her own work, the curations, the gallery partnerships, the educational programs she had dreamed of, were pushed to the side, labeled hobbies or distractions. He began making choices on her behalf, what charities to support, which friends to keep, even what she should wear. He dismissed people in her life he deemed non-essential, friends from university, colleagues from her early days in the art world. Calls went unanswered, visits grew infrequent, until Evelyn's circle was only those who moved within his orbit. For years, she endured it, partly out of loyalty and partly out of hope that things might one day change. But something inside her began to shift. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany or a single explosive argument. It was quiet and gradual, like a tree growing through cracks in concrete. 2 years ago, without telling anyone, not even her closest friend, Evelyn began to reclaim herself. She started reading business journals and attending lectures under a pseudonym. She reconnected with an old mentor who introduced her to a new world of private investing. She opened her own bank account in another name. She purchased a modest office space in East London and began laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the Rose Foundation. Every move she made was strategic, hidden beneath the appearance of continued compliance. To Richard, she was still the silent partner, the elegant wife standing by his side. But in truth, Evelyn was no longer standing beside him. She was standing on her own, quietly gathering the strength, the resources, and the clarity to step out of the shadows. And when she did, it would not be as anyone's wife, but as a force in her own right. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Evelyn's phone buzzed with a message from Madeline Hart, an old friend and longtime patron of the Bennett Foundation. The message was short, almost hesitant. "Did you pull out of the gala this year? I didn't see your name on the list." Evelyn paused, a chill prickling down her spine. That couldn't be right. She had never missed a gala since its inception. Even during the final, strained years of her marriage to Richard, she had attended with quiet dignity, honoring the charitable mission she had helped shape. She quickly dialed Madeline back. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to mask the unease in her voice. Madeline's tone was apologetic but firm. "I just got the final list. You're not on it. Not as a guest. Not even as a donor. It's like you were never part of it." Confused, Evelyn opened the foundation's website and browsed the donors' archive. Her name, once proudly displayed among the founding members, was gone. The tribute photo of her presenting a scholarship check to a group of young women had vanished. Even past articles that mentioned her involvement had been scrubbed. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deletion. A precise and calculated erasure. Her first instinct was to call the foundation directly. She tried 3 different contacts she had once worked with personally. Each time, the calls went straight to voicemail. No callbacks. No explanations. Within hours, it became painfully clear Richard had orchestrated this. It wasn't just about excluding her from one night. It was a symbolic act, publicly cutting her out of the legacy she had helped build. For a brief moment, she felt a familiar tightness in her chest, an old ache that came from years of being made to feel invisible. But it passed just as quickly as it came. Because this time, Evelyn didn't feel powerless. She felt focused. Calm. This was Richard's final attempt to humiliate her, to show her, and the world, that she no longer mattered. But what he didn't know was that she had already moved beyond him. She didn't need an invitation. She didn't need a place on his list. Because she was about to write a list of her own, one that would change everything. Evelyn chose not to react with desperation or anger. She chose something far more powerful, to rise, with grace and precision. And when she returned, it wouldn't be as a guest. It would be as the one running the show. While Richard enjoyed the spotlight, Evelyn moved through the world like a whisper, unseen, unheard, but deeply intentional. In the months following their quiet separation, when the press speculated and society watched with vague curiosity, Evelyn was not sulking in the shadows. She was rebuilding, not out of revenge, but out of necessity. For the first time in years, she had the freedom to think clearly, to dream beyond the limits of someone else's name. With a quiet determination, she began laying the groundwork for a legacy entirely her own. Using her deep knowledge of the art world, education policy, and social justice, areas she had long been passionate about, Evelyn began researching causes that aligned with her core beliefs. She traveled under pseudonyms, attended under-the-radar philanthropic summits in Amsterdam, Cape Town, and Toronto, and met quietly with women who had once stood in her shoes, intelligent, capable, but silenced by circumstance. It started with small grants to community art programs and educational scholarships for girls in underfunded schools across the UK. Then came investments in women's shelters and transitional housing programs that supported survivors of domestic abuse, not just with safety, but with career tools, mental health resources, and legal aid. Evelyn knew what it felt like to be trapped in a golden cage, smiling in photographs while your voice was slowly being buried. She didn't just want to donate money, she wanted to build something sustainable. And so, the Rose Foundation was born. It was elegant, global in its outlook, but deeply personal in its mission. The rose, a symbol of beauty and resilience, felt fitting. Evelyn chose it because it bloomed even when the thorns tried to guard it. The foundation was carefully structured with layers of privacy. Legal advisors ensured her identity was protected. Trusted financial consultants helped her diversify her investments, quietly buying up equity in tech startups, ethical fashion labels, and eco-focused brands, all under holding companies. Within 18 months, Evelyn had built a financial portfolio that rivaled Richard's in scale, only hers came with purpose. She was wealthier than she had ever been, but more importantly, she was free. She recruited silent partners, women she had met during her quiet journey, lawyers, consultants, educators, and investors who shared her vision. Together, they built a global network that helped fund and support local leaders, especially women, from underserved communities around the world. The Rose Foundation gained a reputation for discretion and impact, becoming a trusted name among high-level philanthropists. And yet, no one knew it was Evelyn behind it all. She attended no red carpets, gave no interviews. Not even her name appeared on the website. Everything she did was under the alias E. Rose. And in one of her boldest moves yet, Evelyn began donating, anonymously, to the very foundation she had been erased from, the Bennett Foundation. Her contributions, made through shell companies and donor-advised funds, were sizable enough to rescue several of their projects on the brink of collapse. Richard's board, desperate for funds after a few large donors pulled out, welcomed the mysterious benefactor with open arms. They spoke of this E. Rose in reverent tones, wondering who this visionary was that believed so strongly in their mission. Irony swirled like perfume through the halls of the foundation Evelyn helped build. Her money now kept it alive, her influence now shaped its future, and yet her name was nowhere to be found. Even Richard, obsessed with image and power, never paused to ask who E. Rose might be. In his mind, Evelyn was a relic of his past, a gentle, passive woman now fading into quiet obscurity. He had no idea that she was still here, not only watching but shaping the very world he thought he controlled. Evelyn didn't need recognition. She didn't need applause. What she needed was to rebuild on her terms. And she had done exactly that, quietly, effectively, and with a kind of grace that left no fingerprints. But her silence was never meant to last forever. The time was coming when she would no longer stand behind the curtain. She would step into the light, not as someone's wife, not as a name on a forgotten list, but as the architect of her own empire. The night of the gala arrived like a crescendo. Rose Hall, wrapped in shimmering golden lights and framed by velvet ropes, stood proudly at the edge of the Thames, ready to welcome London's most powerful. Paparazzi crowded both sides of the grand staircase, cameras flashing like strobe lights as sleek black cars pulled up one after another. Celebrities stepped out in couture, royals arrived with armed security, and titans of industry posed for photos that would grace the next morning's headlines. Inside, a string quartet played near the grand foyer, and champagne flowed like water beneath the towering crystal chandeliers. Every table had been set with precision, fresh roses, engraved menus, and tiny plaques with the names of billionaires and baronesses. It was a night to be remembered. Richard Bennett stood near the main entrance, drinking in the attention with his trademark smirk. He looked every bit the king of the evening, dressed in a hand-tailored black tuxedo with a white silk pocket square and silver cufflinks glinting beneath the light. His arm was draped around Cassandra Hart, a striking socialite nearly 20 years his junior, whose claim to fame was a blend of modeling, inherited wealth, and a relentless online presence. She wore a daring red gown that left little to the imagination, and she clung to Richard like a prize on display. The cameras loved them, images of the couple had already started circulating on social media, drawing admiration and raised eyebrows alike. As they moved through the reception area, Richard greeted guests with polished charm, exchanging pleasantries and subtle boasts. But when asked how the gala had survived a last-minute donor withdrawal, a fact leaked just a week prior, he leaned in with a twinkle in his eye and said, "A mystery sponsor stepped in. Someone generous, with vision. You'll hear their name tonight." The statement sent waves through the crowd. A mystery donor? At his event? Whispers floated through the air like perfume. Was it a tech billionaire? A royal family from abroad? A secret merger announcement in disguise? Everyone wanted to know who had stepped in to save London's most prestigious night. Back outside, a single black car pulled up at the edge of the carpet. No photographers swarmed, no one rushed to greet the guest. The driver stepped out and opened the door slowly. Evelyn Bennett emerged in silence. She wore a custom white gown that clung to her form with sculpted elegance, the fabric catching light like moonstone. Her hair was swept into a timeless chignon, her jewelry understated but rare, a single diamond bracelet and earrings that had once belonged to her grandmother. She didn't need flash or flair. She was the moment. No entourage followed her. No one announced her arrival. But as she stepped onto the carpet and began walking toward the entrance, heads turned. Not all recognized her immediately, but there was something about her presence. Strong. Calm. Unshakable. She didn't glance at the cameras. She didn't need to. Evelyn had arrived. And everything was about to change. Inside Rose Hall, the atmosphere was electric, laughter clinked against crystal glasses, and the orchestra had just transitioned into a soft waltz as servers weaved through the crowd with silver trays of canapes. Conversations fluttered from business to politics to fashion, all against the backdrop of curated perfection. The energy in the room shifted subtly the moment Evelyn stepped through the grand entrance. At first, no one noticed. The hush didn't fall immediately, but it spread, like a slow tide that began with one pair of widened eyes, then another, then a small gasp near the back of the room. The pianist's hands faltered for the briefest moment, then the melody trailed off completely. A soft, stunned silence followed, broken only by the faint clicking of heels against marble. Heads turned, one by one, toward the woman in white making her way through the hall. She didn't rush. She didn't smile nervously or look around for reassurance. Evelyn moved with unshakable grace, her back straight, her chin lifted just slightly, not in arrogance, but in quiet assurance. Her dress, sculpted from satin and adorned with the subtlest shimmer, seemed to glow under the chandeliers. She was no longer the silent figure at someone's side. Tonight, she was undeniable. Murmurs rippled through the room as guests leaned toward one another, asking in hushed awe, "Is that Evelyn Bennett?" Others just stared, eyes wide, struggling to reconcile the image of the forgotten wife with the vision now walking through the heart of London's elite. On the raised platform near the front, Richard Bennett stood mid-toast, a crystal glass in one hand and a self-satisfied smile frozen on his lips. He hadn't seen her yet, his attention fixed on a nearby guest. But the sudden silence caught him off guard. He turned slowly, eyes narrowing as they followed the collective gaze of the room. And then he saw her. For a split second, his face drained of color. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. Cassandra, beside him, followed his line of sight and tightened her grip on his arm. "Who is she?" she whispered, but Richard didn't answer. He knew exactly who she was. Evelyn met his eyes but didn't break stride. She didn't flinch, didn't lower her gaze. She simply continued forward, each step deliberate, each breath calm. She wasn't here to confront him, not yet. She wasn't here to make a scene. She was here to claim what was always hers. A woman in a black gown near the stage stepped forward with a note card in hand, her voice trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, glancing briefly at Evelyn, then at the stunned crowd, "please rise in appreciation for tonight's primary sponsor, whose generous contribution made this evening possible. May I present Evelyn Rose Bennett, founder of the Rose Foundation." For a moment, the room held its breath. And then, slowly, almost reverently, people began to stand. Chairs shifted, shoes scuffed lightly against the floor, and the applause started, uncertain at first, then stronger. A few guests looked to Richard for permission to clap. He remained motionless. But the tide had already turned. The applause swelled, joined by cheers and camera flashes. Evelyn paused briefly at the foot of the stage, her face calm, her eyes scanning the room not with triumph, but clarity. She didn't need this approval. But she had earned it. Every step, every moment of silence, every invisible battle, had led here. And now, the woman who had once been erased was not only seen but celebrated. The velvet-curtained VIP lounge buzzed with murmurs and expensive laughter as champagne glasses clinked gently, but the energy shifted the moment Evelyn stepped into the room. Conversations dimmed into background noise as eyes subtly tracked her movement, fascinated not just by her arrival but by the ripple effect it had created throughout the evening. Guests who had once barely acknowledged her presence at past galas now found themselves stealing glances, curious, even admiring. She moved with ease, poised among billionaires and diplomats, her very existence reshaping the power structure of the night. But not everyone was clapping. From the far side of the lounge, Richard watched her with a tightly clenched jaw and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His ego, once inflated by control, was now cracking beneath the weight of something he had never anticipated, her rise. Moments later, he slipped away from Cassandra's side, his footsteps sharp and deliberate across the polished marble. "Evelyn," he said firmly, just loud enough to turn a few heads. She didn't flinch. She turned slowly, her expression calm, her posture relaxed as if she'd been expecting him. "How did you pull this off?" he hissed under his breath, stepping close enough that their conversation was just barely out of earshot. His tone was more incredulous than angry, as though the world had suddenly slipped out from under his carefully polished shoes. "You sponsored the entire event?" Evelyn tilted her head slightly and offered him a slow, graceful smile. "I didn't need your name to do it," she said, her voice quiet but laced with steel. "I had my own." Richard narrowed his eyes. "Rose," he said, almost spitting the name. "That was you? That ridiculous pseudonym?" He laughed under his breath. "You used a name I once made fun of. Are you seriously standing here thinking that makes you powerful?" Still composed, Evelyn met his gaze evenly. "You mocked it because you didn't understand it," she replied. Rose was never for you. It was always for me. For the version of me you tried to erase." Her tone didn't waver, didn't rise. She wasn't here for a screaming match. She was here to finish what she started, with dignity. "You removed me from your guest list, your donor history, even our public life. So I built something of my own. You never saw it because you never looked." Richard stepped in closer, his voice low and biting. "You think you can hijack my gala and embarrass me in front of the press, the donors? There are legal consequences for what you've done. Do you have any idea what this looks like?" Evelyn didn't step back. She didn't so much as blink. "It looks like you lost control," she said gently. "It looks like you built a world so tightly around yourself that you didn't realize someone else had quietly outgrown it." He glared at her, jaw tight, the weight of public humiliation beginning to seep into his perfectly crafted exterior. But before he could fire back, movement around them interrupted the moment. A few guests had begun noticing the tension, some lingering too close, others watching from across the room. Whispers fluttered from couch to couch, more eyes shifting in their direction. "Is that Evelyn and Richard?" someone murmured. "What's happening?" another asked, peering curiously from behind a champagne flute. The air thickened with curiosity. The spectacle of power unraveling was irresistible. Richard sensed the shift and tried to regain composure, straightening his cuffs, forcing a smirk. "You think this changes anything?" he muttered. "They'll forget your name in a week." Evelyn's eyes held his for a long, measured beat. "That's the difference between you and me, Richard," she said softly. "You've always been obsessed with the spotlight. I only ever cared about the work." She turned then, effortlessly, leaving him standing alone among the murmurs. With each step away, the crowd leaned further into her orbit. The whispers weren't just about gossip anymore, they were about admiration, recognition. And for the first time in a very long time, Richard Bennett wasn't the most powerful person in the room. The host stepped up to the microphone near the edge of the ballroom stage, voice warm but slightly trembling, as if aware that history was unfolding in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, glancing across the floor filled with London's most powerful, "we are honored tonight not only by extraordinary generosity but also by the return of a woman who embodies strength, grace, and vision. Evelyn Rose Bennett, would you please say a few words?" A collective murmur moved through the crowd. Some clapped immediately, others hesitated, still stunned by her transformation. But all eyes turned toward Evelyn, who stood near the center of the room in her glowing white gown, composed as ever. She didn't flinch or decline. With a polite nod and a gentle smile, Evelyn made her way toward the stage, her heels clicking softly across the floor, the sound amplified by the silence of the room. She took the microphone with both hands and looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some not, but all watching with rapt attention. The cameras were already rolling, phones raised discreetly, social media buzzing with captions like "Evelyn Bennett just stole the night" and "Who needs a +1 when you are the moment?" Her voice, when she began, was calm and clear, each word chosen with precision. "For years," she said, "I stood beside power. I smiled beside it. I clapped for it. I made space for it." She paused, letting the silence stretch just enough for the weight of her words to settle. "But tonight, I don't stand beside it. I am it." A wave of murmurs and gasps rippled through the crowd, immediately followed by a sharp burst of applause from a few bold guests near the front. Evelyn continued, her voice rising with a quiet strength that filled the hall. "I know what it means to be invisible. I know what it feels like to have your voice dismissed, your name erased, your work attributed to someone else. But I also know what happens when we choose not to stay silent, when we rebuild not for revenge, but for purpose." She didn't look at Richard, but she didn't need to. Her presence alone drew a clear contrast between the two of them, one clinging to image, the other radiating authenticity. The Rose Foundation was built by women who were told they weren't enough, women who believed otherwise. We are not waiting to be invited anymore. We're building our own tables. The applause returned, louder now, swelling with each word. Even Richard's closest allies, those who had exchanged whispers with him earlier in the evening, found themselves slowly clapping. The truth of Evelyn's words echoed with undeniable power. Some guests stood. Others simply watched, awed by the calm command she held over the room. By the time she stepped down from the stage, the applause hadn't yet faded. Flashbulbs flickered as she passed. Within minutes, clips of her speech began circulating online, accompanied by headlines like "Evelyn Bennett, the comeback queen" and "Power wears white tonight." And as she returned to her seat, calm and radiant, Evelyn knew this moment wasn't just about reclaiming space. It was about making sure no woman after her ever had to fight this hard to be seen. The morning after the gala, the city awoke to headlines that shook Richard Bennett's carefully constructed empire. Investors who had once lined up eagerly to back his ventures now called for urgent meetings, questioning the stability of his leadership. The quiet confidence he wore like armor began to crack under the weight of scrutiny. Rumors circulated in financial circles that the mysterious Rose who had rescued the gala was none other than Evelyn Bennett herself, and with that revelation, whispers of a shift in power grew louder. Richard's board convened an emergency session, the tension palpable as members debated the future direction of the Bennett Foundation and his corporate holdings. Many voiced admiration for Evelyn's vision and the fresh energy she brought through the Rose Foundation's philanthropic successes. Meanwhile, Cassandra Hart, once Richard's dazzling arm candy, began to distance herself from the unfolding drama. Social media posts from her accounts became sparse and vague, and insiders reported that she was quietly negotiating new opportunities far from Richard's sphere. The glittering veneer of Richard's personal life showed signs of wear, with friends and allies reconsidering their loyalties. Behind closed doors, murmurs of discontent grew louder, as board members who had once been loyal started to question whether Richard's obstinance might cost them more than just prestige. Sitting alone in his sleek penthouse office overlooking the city, Richard stared blankly at his phone screen. Headlines blazed in bold letters: Evelyn Rose Bennett, the real power behind the gala, from shadow to spotlight, Evelyn's stunning rise, Bennett Foundation's future rests on a woman's shoulders. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they signified a truth he had long tried to suppress. The empire he had built on control and image was shifting beneath his feet. For the first time in years, Richard faced the harsh reality that the woman he had tried to erase was now the very force shaping the narrative, in the future. 1 year after that unforgettable night, Evelyn stood at the pinnacle of a new era, not just for herself, but for countless women whose lives her work had touched. The Rose Foundation had blossomed into a global powerhouse, its reach extending far beyond London's elite circles. From bustling cities in Africa to remote villages in Southeast Asia, the foundation supported hundreds of women-led ventures, businesses, educational programs, and creative projects that empowered women to claim their voices and futures. Evelyn's vision had become a movement, one rooted in resilience, authenticity, and lasting change. Reports of the foundation's success filled industry journals and philanthropic newsletters, praising its unique approach: quiet, strategic, and profoundly impactful. Alongside her philanthropic achievements, Evelyn had become a style icon in her own right. The same elegance that once graced the gala had evolved into a signature blend of timeless fashion and modern confidence. Designers clamored to dress her for events, photographers sought her for magazine covers, and influencers quoted her speeches on reinvention and empowerment. Yet Evelyn remained grounded, often attributing her success not to glamour but to the strength cultivated through hardship and determination. She used her growing platform thoughtfully, championing causes close to her heart and mentoring emerging female leaders around the world. Social media buzzed with admiration for the woman who had transformed from a silent partner into a beacon of hope and inspiration. Meanwhile, Richard's world had dimmed considerably. Ousted from the board of Bennett Global amid shareholder pressure and waning support, he retreated from public life. In a quiet London flat, he spent months writing a memoir, attempting to reclaim his narrative. But the book, titled Control and Consequence, sold few copies, criticized for its self-justifying tone and failure to acknowledge the true catalyst of change, Evelyn. The once mighty titan now found himself overshadowed not just by his ex-wife's achievements but by the broader shift in societal values he had resisted for so long. His name faded from headlines, replaced by stories celebrating female leadership and authentic influence. On a bright spring morning, Evelyn walked through the newly opened wing of her art gallery, a project funded by the Rose Foundation to support emerging women artists worldwide. The space was light-filled and modern, yet warm, reflecting her vision of blending tradition with progress. At the entrance, a polished gold plaque bore her name, Evelyn Rose Bennett, founder and patron. She paused for a moment, fingers lightly tracing the engraved letters, a quiet smile playing on her lips. This was more than a name, it was a testament to her journey, a symbol of triumph over erasure and invisibility. As she moved deeper into the gallery, surrounded by vibrant works that spoke of resilience and creativity, Evelyn's thoughts drifted back to the night she had been excluded from the gala list. A distant memory of a man trying to control her story. But she no longer felt bitterness, only clarity and strength. Because in removing her, he had unwittingly ignited a fire. A fire that burned brighter than any list or invitation could contain. She whispered softly to herself, the words carrying the weight of everything she had overcome: "He removed me from his story. So I wrote my own."